Okay, everyone, welcome again. Back to the key of redemption in our hands. We are holding over here episode 2, class number 2, which means we're learning the Dvar Malchus, and we from 57-51. We are holding at chapter number 4. So this is the second week of the Dvar Malchus, which is Parshas Acharei and Kedoshim. Okay, so please listen to episode 1 to be able to understand what we're talking. The Rebbe began the Farbrengen by talking about the idea of why the essential word of redemption is really all the letters of the world of exile. And how can it be that redemption and exile are so far from each other? So yesterday we discussed that redemption doesn't mean a new world. Redemption doesn't mean a new reality. Redemption doesn't mean an escape from all that we have from our physical bodies or from the reality that we exist in, from the world we're in, from whatever it is that we see as darkness. But redemption means the liberation of everything and a liberation of a certain entity from a constricted state. And when we talk about the ultimate redemption, means the liberation from all of existence from its constrictions. The constrictions of things is when the godliness of something is concealed. God is infinite, free, boundless, truth, unlimited. And all the exile, the constriction, comes from when the godliness of something is not given its expression. A world when it's not tuning in to its godly core, to its godly spark, to its godly content and its godly purpose. So the redemption is as a result of all the tough work and hard toil and efforts that we do in the time of the concealment, when the world is in a state of when the content and the purpose and the true existence of everything is obscuring the godliness. And when we work through the method of Torah and mitzvahs, studying the Torah and learning mitzvahs, and all the other times that we transcend our selfishness to tune in and live a higher life for a higher purpose, every action of every human being doing that, especially the actions of Torah and mitzvahs, is producing the redemption. And what's the redemption? That very same world, but illuminated. And then, so therefore it's Gola, but we're finding the Aleph in it, and then we have Geula. Yesterday we gave a few examples from that, and now we continue with chapter number 4. So the Rebbe therefore continues, but now he asks a very strong question. Okay, let's accept that redemption means that everything we have, we're not going to lose anything. You're going to have your body, you're going to have your friends, you're going to have your talents, your abilities, your businesses, your associates, your accomplishments. And everything that we have, everything that we've built, everything that we've constructed, nothing is going to get lost. Whatever is good and positive in our lives is coming along with us into the redemption. So, and that is awesome. And that's why the word Geula includes Gola in it and is made up primarily from the word Gola, which means exile. The question over here is, however, is as follows. So let us accept that that's true, that we're not going to drop anything and everything is going to come along with us. But is that the sum totality of the new world that we're going to be entering into? Is it just going to end? Is its ultimate accomplishment? Is its ultimate achievement that whatever we have is going to be illuminated? Or isn't there going to be anything new that's going to come to the world after the Moshiach comes? Now, the idea that Moshiach is a liberation of what is, not a new world, the Rebbe proves it from Rambam, from Maimonides. Where the Maimonides emphasizes very strongly the laws of Kings, chapter 11. Don't think that in the days of Mashiach there is going to be the nature of the world is going to change. In other words, we're going to have a new world. Rather, no, it's the same old world. It's just that everybody's going to recognize God. That's what Maimonides says. But the question then is that it? Don't we also know that even though Maimonides says that in the days of Mashiach the world will not change, that is only the early stages of the redemption. However, as discussed in various other talks that the Rebbe gave, proven from very different places of Torah, is that there is without a question a miraculous side to the coming of the redemption, where new amazing things, new phenomenon will be introduced in the world. Not only an uplift of whatever is, but an introduction of crazy new things that are going to happen, beginning with the greatest miracle of all, the resurrection of the dead. Everybody that died is coming back to life again. So that is an enormous novelty that is an enormous miracle. So we can't say there won't be any miracles, but as explained, as the Rebbe explained in different talks, that means that there is the early stage when Mashiach comes, the beginning stages of Mashiach is that it doesn't have a change in the world, but rather just a godly consciousness in everything that is, and therefore so many of the problems or all the problems will fall away, because a world tuned into God is a healthy and peaceful, harmonious, plentiful world. But that's stage number one. Then there are going to be later stages where there's going to be incredible new phenomenon that is going to enter into the world, which means much higher godly lights that the world has ever had is going to come into the world. That's the source of all these newer miracles, which means there is going to be a new world built on the old world. So even though the section of the redemption that is relating to taking what was, salvaging what was, and elevating it, transforming it, recomposing it, if you might say, or restructuring it, that it's shining and it's polishing it. I get that. But that seems to be only the amateur stuff of the redemption. Then there are going to be further elevations and elevations and elevations, which are going to be taking it much further and much higher levels. And on those levels, we would argue and we would have to say that they're not related to the exile, because it's a world completely past the exile. It's literally a new world. And if that's the case, why do we refer to as in Hebrew as the entire redemption in Torah as the word geula, which most of the letters of the word geula is made up of gola. So I would say something to phrase the question would be like something like this. Let's say the first phase of the redemption is 10 years or 20 years. So during that year, 20 years, you might say that 95% of the redemption is exile, but the 5% is the godly illumination of it. So that's why the word geula is primarily made up of the very world that we have now illuminated. Well, once the 5, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever, 30, 40 years, whatever it is, passes, and the world is moving into a new era and a new stage, where suddenly the miracles are beginning to kick in. Higher miracles and higher experiences and higher godly revelation, at which at a certain point, almost the world is utterly not recognizable, the old world, and a new world is growing out of it. At that point, why are we still calling it geula? At that point, it shouldn't be called geula, which means 90% of the word, or how much actually, it's 5 letters, or let's say 80% of the word is made up of the word gola. It should be now become a new phenomenon, but it's not that way. The entire future is referred to as geula. So to understand this, the Rebbe says in chapter 5, that's where we come to chapter 5, with a phenomenal explanation. His explanation is based on the idea over here is really discussed in Tanya, and it's already explored in so many Hasidic discourses and in so much of the Rebbe's talks. But over here, he particularly is finding it because the Rebbe is teaching us how to find all the matters of Mashiach in all aspects of our life, beginning with living with the times. That, when we look around in our environment, the circumstances that are around us, we have to find the geula component, which really means we have to open up, we have to discover its inner divine spark, which is redemptive component. So the Rebbe is teaching us how to do that. And that particular Shabbos that the Rebbe was giving the talk, he was opening up all the components of the Shabbos and showing us the messianic, the Mashiach light in that component. So one of the components of the time we're in right now is we study Pirkei Avos, Ethics of the Fathers. That particular Shabbos, Pashas Acharei, and this week is as well, it's the 3rd chapter of Ethics of the Fathers. Ethics of the Fathers has 6 chapters. We study it on the 7 Shabboses that there are, 7 Shabbosim between Pesach and Shavuos. So this Shabbos is going to be Shabbos number 3. So in the 3rd chapter, it opens as follows. Akavya b'malal Omer. Akavya b'malal is one of the sages of the Mishnah. He would always say, Histakel b'shloisha dvarim, analyze or look deeply at 3 things, ve'ein tabah lidei avera, and you will not come to a sin. So analyze and look deeply into 3 things, you will not sin. What are the 3 things? Dama ayin basa, know from where you come. And where you're heading towards, and who you're going to have to give a reckoning for. And Ma'ayin Basa, the Mishnah gets pretty graphic. Where do you come from? From a stinking droplet. Means the droplet, the semen that is at the core of our creation, it's a putrid droplet. That's the beginning of a human being. So what are you bragging about yourself, thinking you're so great? What is it? A putrid droplet. That's the origins. Where you're going? Where does a person end up? To a place of dirt, worms, and bugs. Body decomposes after it's buried. Then you have to listen to the cheshbon, and then your soul that's going to survive all of this is going to stand in front of God to give a reckoning. So when a person thinks every day about these things, it humbles a person. You recognize that the physical pleasures are not here forever. You're going to have to give an accounting before God. So keep this a deep meditation on this every single day is going to create enough consciousness and awareness of to keep us in check and not to follow the whims or the desires of our evil inclination. That's the simple reading of the Mishnah. The Rebbe, however, kind of is going to give us an amazing teaching by just analyzing the first sentence. In the first sentence, it says, look at three things and you will not come to sin. So the question over here is, the Rebbe asks, why did the Mishnah even have to tell you, look at three things? It should have just told you the punchline. You see, the Rebbe is basing it on the concept. Everything he says is always so, it's not just questions. They're always so fitting to, everything is based on deep Torah thoughts that are in the Mishnah. We know, particularly Mishnah, has been the difference between Talmud and Mishnah. Even though Mishnah is the backbone of the Talmud, but Mishnah are short, concise teachings by the earlier rabbis. The Talmud is a lengthy discussion exploring and unpacking the Mishnah. That's what the Talmud does. So in the Talmud, you'll find elaborate talk. In the Gemara, but in sorry for I got knocked out. I don't know what's going on. But in the Mishnah, everything is short and everything is concise. So if that's the case, you would expect that in the Mishnah there shouldn't be any excessive words. This Mishnah seems to be very excessive. It says, look at three things and you won't come to a sin. Know where you come from, where are you going to, and in front of who you're going to give an accounting for. And then it says, where are you coming from? Right? And where are you going to a place? That is so extra. You know, today's days when we're tweeting, there's only a certain amount of words you can put into a tweet. So we work very hard to be able to put a lot of content into a very short phrase. So if you're trying to do that, wouldn't it make more sense for the Mishnah to say, hey, buddy, you don't want to sin, right? Right? So the Mishnah should have said, know where think about where you're coming from. No, I'm sorry. Think about that. You don't even have to say where you're coming from. Think about that you come from a putrid drop and you're going to a place of dust and dirt and bugs and you're going to give an accounting in front of God and you won't sin. That's the short way of saying it. Not start off, think about three things. Then it tells you where you're coming from, where you're going, and who you're going to give an accounting for. We don't know who. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Where you're coming from, where you're going to, yeah, and in front of who you're going to give an accounting for, right? And then where you come from, that's all extra. But the Rebbe, in other places, he elaborates on the immense, lengthy words of the statement. But now he's particularly asking the beginning. Why does it have to tell you, look at three things? Who needs the number? It should have just said, gaze, know where you're coming from, where you're going, and you want to know it's three? Count. Anybody can count it. It's three things it's telling you to instruct. Why does the Mishnah have to tell you that what we're talking about over here, the meditation has three components? Therefore, the Rebbe says, a very interesting take on the Mishnah, that of course on the simple level, the Mishnah is going to follow up and tell you what those three things are. The three things that you should look at are the following three things. But the reason the Mishnah puts out and says three things is because the Mishnah wants to set your mind on three things. And the three things are not necessarily what's going to be followed in the Mishnah. That's something else. The Mishnah is first giving you a perspective. To live life and not sin, and to be in a state where you can't even come to sin, be aware and analyze and think about that there are three things. That's it, three things. It has nothing to do with the rest of the Mishnah. It means that, but the Mishnah means a lot of other things as well, including that when a person has a consciousness of three things, that's going to save you from sinning. So what are those three things? Not what is mentioned not only what's mentioned in the Mishnah, but a general approach to life based on three things. So what are the three things that we should be aware of? Three entities that we should be aware of that we shouldn't sin. They are as follows. Of course, you have to be aware of God. That's the primary awareness. We wake up in the morning, I acknowledge you, God. So we're aware of God. Also, as important is that we recognize that we exist, right? Because if we recognize ourselves. God created us with an awareness of self. And it's important to be aware of self, because when you're aware of self, now you have a job to do. Now you can serve your Creator. So there's God and there's me. Now, one can think that's all I need to know. There's God and there's me. And God, what do you want? Like Abraham says to God, Hineni, I'm here. Whatever you want. What do you need? You need me to give someone a ride? I'll give someone a ride. You need me to go to the market? I go to the market. You need me to pray? I'll pray. You need me to study Torah? I'm going to study Torah. Whatever it is you need to. I'm talking about a spiritual person who wants to really live a holy, godly life, attached, purposeful existence. In that sense, one can think I can live in the world of two. What's the two? It's God and God's expectations of me. I'm living in a relationship with God. And that would be a life of piety. That would be a life of righteousness. So the Mishnah is telling you you're missing the point. You gotta add a third thing into the mix. What is the number three? Number three, the Rebbe says you have to recognize that there is also a world. That besides you and God, there's also a world. Of course, you say, if I'm living in the world of two, I also know there's a world, because I have a body, I have a world. And if I have to serve God, how do I serve God? The mitzvot, and the mitzvot are involved with activities in the world. Pesach, I need to eat matzah, and Sukkot, I need to have a sukkah, and so on and so forth. So, obviously, there is an acknowledgement of the world. To live, you need to eat. So you have to know that the point over here is not that there is a world, to be aware that there is a world, but that there is significance. And there is in that part of my reality and the realization of my purpose of the existence is that there needs to be a bond over here between me, God, and the world. That my relationship with God involves elevating and unifying the world, whatever my part of the world is. I have to bring that in and connect to God in the world, through the world, and with the world. I can't just have my bond with God that is only about me and God. And the world's element of the world is not just a medium for me to connect to God, but that there is a significance to the world itself and to the aspects of the world, that they are important in the relationship with God. So, so what does that mean? What does that mean? That means that although a soul is by just virtue of being a soul, has a very, very deep connection to God. A soul is a piece of God. And before we were born, we were basking in God's radiance. We were in a very, very, very high level of connection. And in a sense, we might say that we came down into the world. Why is God doing this to our soul, to put us into the world? We might argue and say it's in order to challenge our bond with God through distractions, and all the world will serve is a distraction, a way in which it can take our mind off our relationship, the divine truth. And we have to fight our way to dismiss the distraction, ignore the world to the utmost, live a life of celibacy, live a life like a hermit, live a life of the best optimal life according to this view would be fasting, living with, don't be in a relationship with people, not getting married, living in a complete abstinence of all physical pleasure, enjoyment, and all matters of the physical world, living like a monk on a mountain in a cave, and as much as I can to remain deep in meditation on the infinite light of God and the infinite truth. And if the world starts distracting me, I have to like close my eyes even harder and deeper and meditate till I lose all sense of the creation of the world, of anything around me, and I remain attached to God. If that would be so that could be a method of life, but that's a world of two. That's not a world of three. And that's what the mission is. Exactly that is what the mission is coming to negate. What the mission is telling you, no, that's not the way. That's not the purpose. The reason God took your soul down from heaven is because God wants that we should discover him in the world, through the world. Now, although this world that God has placed in front of is coarse and dark and full of evil inclination and full of obstacles and pitfalls and dangerous things. And many times as we enter into the world and we engage the world, our heart gets pulled into all kinds of dark things. We sometimes sin. We sometimes make mistakes. We forget about holiness. We become indulgent. We become arrogant. We become money hungry, power hungry, lustful, all the greed, hate, all the possibilities that the physical dark world creates, especially for a spiritual being. The way to deal with it, according to the Torah way, the true way, the ultimate desire of God, is not that we should run for the hills, as we mentioned earlier, but we should turn around and bit by bit begin fixing this world. How do we fix it? By refining, starting with the refinement of our own body. To recognize that my body is not my enemy. My body is actually the means through which God has now given my soul an opportunity to work its way to a bond with God infinitely deeper and higher than the way my soul was connected to God prior to its descent in the body. Amazing idea. And what do you mean higher? The soul was in such a lofty place. To be the soul that you've given me, she's pure, we say every day in prayer. She's higher than creation. She's on the loftiest levels of spiritual life. That's all true. And then you have to ask the question, if God is so kind and is so beautiful and so magnificent and so compassionate, why would God rip the soul away from such a spiritual lofty place, from such a blissful place, from a place of truth, where all the soul is doing all day long is singing hallelujah, right? Singing to God, God's praises. And it's in a state of such love and enormous fear. Why would God rip the soul away from that? It seems to be very cruel. So if you go into, God forbid, a surgery room in the hospital, you see people masked in blue shrubs, standing over a person and cutting their flesh, literally cutting their flesh, and there's blood splattered all over. And they're cutting deep, and they're getting into the inner organs, into the heart or something. If you've never seen that, you run out and you're screaming bloody murder. This is like the cruelest people. But then you understand that if this is not a torture chamber. This is a hospital. There's actually very good people over there. And what are they doing? They're saving a person's life. So if you see an act of such cruelty, it leads you, and yet it's being done by good people, what is your conclusion? That if they're doing something so horrific, and even though they're nice people, it must be that there is a very good justification that justifies it. That the end goal over here, which is saving a person's life, justifies all this tearing into a person's skin or into a person's flesh, cutting the person open. So let's use that analogy for God. If God acted, and it seems to be in such a cruel way, to take the soul from its state of non-stop enjoyment and pleasure and connection to God, and put the soul into a place where literally the soul is suffocating. That's what it really is. The soul is suffocating. But down here in the body and the coarse physical world creates so much interference, so much static and so much blockage. And even when we try to love and to connect and to be a spiritual person, we keep on slipping and falling. We keep on hitting brick walls. It's excruciatingly difficult. And there's so much distractions. It would be something that seems to be enormously cruel. Why would God do that? And the answer is, you have to say that what will come out of this is that the soul will achieve and bond with God on a level that unimaginably higher than what it had when it was in heaven. But in order for it to have that, it will only have that in the body and through the body and in the world. Not just the body is the soul's immediate portion of the world, and in the world itself, because God is making his ultimate truth available to us in physical matter. That's this awesome teaching. You say physical matter, which is the most obscuring, the most denying of God's truth, the coarsest of all materials, physicality, materialism. It's the most ungodly of things. And guess what? That's where the essence of God is hiding. When the soul is in heaven, the soul is experiencing only rays of God. The soul knows nothing of God's essence when the soul is in heaven. But when the soul will come down in the body, and it will purify the body, it will work the body for 70, 80, 90, 100 years. Let it be 120 years, whatever the lifespan of a person. And we will live in a physical life. And we will recognize that God is the truth of my soul and God is the truth of my body. And my body as well is a subject to my soul. And I will use my body to serve my Creator. How do I do that? I will work hard to make a living. I'll put all my physical strengths and all my passion and fire in making money, making a living. So now I took all that, I've literally invested my body and I made the money. And then someone comes knocking on the door for an important cause and they ask me to help. And I have to fight with my evil inclination because part of me, my ego, which is the staple of the material physical world, is screaming, this is my hard work money. Why should I give it away to someone else? Why should I help poor people? Why should I help, why should I take care of whatever? It's my money. And here I will cave in and I will bust that physical obscuring of God and claim, no, God is the truth of my body and God is the truth of my business and God is my success. And it's his money. I'm making him real in the material and in the physical. And when I do that, I illuminate and polish the physical body. Literally, I'm remaking the cells of my body to be open for godliness, to be polished. I'm reprogramming the very, very DNA. I'm editing. Today someone gave me a new word. I'm editing the DNA of my physical existence and claiming God is the truth of my reality. And that's why the money belongs to Hashem. And I will give tzedakah with this money and do God's will with the money. Wow. And at this moment, the soul is touching God's essence, because God's essence is hiding and masquerading in the physical, in the material. What is the coarsest, what is the most obscuring is really the concealment of that which is the highest and the deepest. And this, again, it's not my body, it's the entire world. It's whatever is dark out there. I have to really dig in and find its true dark, its true essence, its true godly spark. That's the concept of look at three things. And when we live our life to recognize that we're not escaping the world, we're embracing the world, but we have to refine it with God's will. We have to apply the Torah through the consciousness, the higher conscious. You dig into your soul through meditation and prayer. reach a very strong truth, core truth and connection to God, and then use the Torah with that inspiration from the soul to utilize and to live the physical life in accordance to God's will, we elevate and we polish the physical world, and ultimately we come face to face with the essence of God in the physical, through the physical, and only through the physical. And we reach a complete marriage with Hashem. This is the ultimate. Look at three things. And then, let me put it, and then what is the connection? You will not come to a sin. You see, if we choose to live a life of two, not of three, in other words, couldn't care less about the world. I'm just seeking to be a spiritual person. I couldn't care less about my community. I couldn't care less about my family. I couldn't care less about my environment or even of my own body. I just want to live on a higher spiritual plane. I want to just, attach myself in some kind of go on spiritual trips and connect on that high level, which we all have that inside of us. That's why we like to climb mountains. That's why we like the peacefulness of nature and a removed setting. And that's important. We charge our batteries that way. That's the idea of Shabbos. That's the idea of many moments in our day is supposed to be transcendence and removal from the physical and the earthy. We always have to remember, like we discussed yesterday in yesterday's class, you got to go back home and bring all that light to your neighbors, to your friends. You got to bring it to your shopping centers. You got to bring it into your cities. You can't just live in the desert. You got to live in the cities. You got to mingle with people. You got to be invested in society. You have to improve the society. You have to make people. Yes, you got to get onto YouTube. Yes, you got to get onto Instagram. Yes, you got to get onto Twitter. Yes, it was created so that we can spread these truths to millions of people. Don't say, ugh, social media, it's horrible. The world is so dark. I'm shutting it off. I'm running away from it. I don't want to have anything to do with it. No, you're obligated to make yourself heard. If you have spiritual consciousness and holy consciousness, you're obligated to reach the youth, to reach where the energy is, to reach where the people that are lost, because it's in this physical world, it's in these masses of millions of people where God wants to reside, where truth wants to make its way in. And God, when we discover him in this material physical world, in the people that are the most materialistic, in the people that seem to be the least of godly sensitive, when we open up their eyes and their hearts to God, then the deepest truth of God is revealed. And then you can never sin. What does that mean? We're living a life of two. Let's go back to that point, that it's me and God, and I ignore the world. There's always a possibility for sin. Because why? Hypothetically. Because we don't know if one day, for whatever reason, your spiritual, what is it called? Hiatus, or whatever it is, vacation and experience has kind of come to an end, and circumstances pull you into a world, and you haven't trained your eyes to recognize that there cannot be a thing that is not God, because you just ignored things. You ignored stuff. You ran away from stuff. You went to a place of beyond stuff. So you didn't learn how to deal with stuff. So then when stuff comes your way, the stuff can, God forbid, drag a person down. But if from the from the very get-go, you learn the art of dealing with the physical material world, dealing with the body, not just dealing with it, but opening your eyes to recognize that God is the truth of every person, of every object, of every phenomenon, and the truth is even of every perversion. And when you recognize that and you look deeper into it and you find the godly content and you reveal it according to Torah and according to mitzvah, and you reveal it, then there's no possibility of ever going off. Because no matter what it is, anything that is placed before you, you learn how to penetrate it, open up its soul. So what can lead you astray if there's nothing but God? It's not a possibility to go astray. A person who lives sheltered and removed from everything never knows if they will stop being sheltered, what's going to be. But if a person who learned how to live their life in a world of multiplicity, in a world of of materialism in the world, and yet not only maintain their own godliness, but to reveal the godliness amongst the material people around you. Somehow crack open, even in these people, their godly soul. Or show them how they too are part of God's plan. By using their wealth, using their power and their things to further God's interest in this world. Taking the coarseness of the world itself and utilizing it for holiness. That's the ultimate. That's the ultimate. It can't come to us. So now we'll stop for a moment and we'll see it's a whole. This whole idea of looking at three, not at two, so powerful. Why is it so powerful? What that really means is that exile is redemption. Let's go back. Let's connect this. What is the world really? What is the world? The world is really the state of exile. Before God created stuff, before he created a world, before he created stuff, there was him, and we say the souls preceded creation because we're part of God. There was us and God, our souls and God, meaning pure beings that are nothing other than just hypothetical recipients of God's light. That's all. Kind of, before there's really world, even souls are just, so to speak, embedded in the divine. So it's only God. What's the process of creation? Process of creation really means a process of concealment. God starts bringing into existence worlds meaning the Hebrew word for the word olam means from the word helam, concealment. God starts putting screens on the fundamental truth that he is and there's not but him. And these screens start creating realities and realities and realities. Now, what's the substance of these realities? Nothing other than the primal being. That's the being of everything. But it's created in a manner and in a fashion that it should deny or obscure or hide. And as these layers get further and further and more screens and more screening and more screening and more screening, finally we get to the lowest dimension, which is the physical world. So what is the essence of the physical world? An exile, which means a truth being blocked, a constriction, a block. But as we're understanding now, the point of this constriction and this darkness and this concealment and this blockage of the godliness is precisely in this dark constriction is where God is transmitting, opening up the souls that were once embedded in his infinite light. He's imbuing, he's telling the souls, let's go into this darkness and I want to meet you. Both of us will burrow through. We will burrow through the darkness. You will burrow through. And when we will meet, you will discover me like you've never known me before. You'll know my ultimate essential truth. What does that mean? That means the exile is the redemption. The exile is really, the exile, which is a concealment, will lead to a revelation of what? Ultimately of the essence of God. And for that reason, the entire redemption, not only the first stage of the redemption that we spoke about earlier, which will be the immediate revelation of all godly stuff, that everything in the world has godly content, but even the futuristic, deeper evolvements, which are going to come from God's presence being more revealed and more revealed and more opened up and more revealed within the world. And therefore, it's going to take the world into an enormous metamorphosis, where the world will metamorphosize into the highest, most infinite levels of who knows what, of growth and development. It is all hinged on the work of penetrating the darkness. Because that's exactly what the work is. To peel the darkness from the concealment, and when you peel the darkness and reveal the truth that's in the concealment, you're meeting God's essence. That begins to show itself by the redemption in stages. But what that really means is that even the most advanced stages of that It's all because of the work that we did within the darkness. Because that entire revelation of the future, which is taking us beyond light into the essence of God, for whatever incomprehensible reasons for it, is only transmittable to us, to the souls, through the darkness. And through the darkest of the darkest. God created the world, even when the world was beautiful. And then it only intensified, got darker. And when there was a temple standing, it was nice and beautiful. So it was a higher level of, within the exile, within the greater cosmic exile, it was kind of a more peaceful moment, a nice time. But then the exile itself, the world itself, plunged darker. And when it reached the epitome of darkness, which is the exile we're here in the last 2,000 years, we're really hitting the deepest notes. It means we're being presented with an opportunity for the highest essence to come out through that darkness and from the darkness. And the Rebbe even takes it so far, and he says that this mission that comes out from the marriage of the three, which means the connection that we get with God via and within the setting of the darkness, which is the world, is so essential, it is so important, that we are not complete without it. Because we are not reaching our ultimate state of what we're capable of without it. So it's a must. So much so that he quotes from the words of the Tanya, Kizeh kol ha'adam. This is our entire beingness. In other words, if we choose, God forbid, the path of two, to run away from the world, to seclude ourselves, lock ourselves away, and just busy ourselves with our own spiritual advances, and not care about the surrounding and infusing people around us with higher consciousness and higher awareness, if we're locking our way and running away from it, not only are we lacking something, we miss the entire. God too is unfulfilled until we discover and make this connection. That is a shocking state. God is unfulfilled. God is perfect. No, of course he's perfect. But God, as the Midrash tells us, God had a taiva. God had a longing, a desire for a home in the lower. He wants to be revealed in the lower. He wants a home in the lower. In the lower worlds, meaning that which conceals. Now, when you have a desire, and desire is unfulfilled, then you're lacking. So to speak, as hard as it is to say, it's lacking. There is an unfulfilled desire. Of course, God didn't need the desire, but he had the desire. And when he had the desire to have a home in the low, so that means God needs us desperately to do this. Desperately to do this. We need to do this, and he needs us to do this. There's the ultimate necessity for us to get the job done. Look at three things. Analyze three things. Live with the recognition and the awareness that there's three. There is you, there is God, and there is a bonding in which we will achieve with God via and through the world. Don't forget the world. And this explains why the entire redemption, everything about the redemption, is produced by the physical world. And the other point of it is two things. First of all, it's produced through our work now. Even what's going to happen in 1 billion years after Moshiach comes, it's produced from the discovery of the essence, which will only be opening itself more to us, but it will be opening itself via the work in the physical. And number two, and the second point is, as great as those revelations will be, they will take place in the physical body. Because our our ultimate state is not going to be as floating souls in the spiritual world. We will not eventually evolve into a spiritual being. Sure, the physical, our bodies will evolve greatly, but they will always be physical bodies forever and ever and ever, because the deepest revelations will always be connected to our physical flesh. Physicality is where it's at, the material physical world. Connected to God through the medium of God's will, which is Torah and Mitzvah. This is awesome. Let that sink in. So now, once we understand that, I don't know where there is to go after this. This is like the deepest. This is the highest. He says now, and now we go to chapter number 7. Now the Rebbe is going to find this concept in all aspects, including the time that we're in now, in addition to the ethics of the fathers that we just studied, is going to discover that as well in the one of the spiritual exercises we do at this time, which is the mitzvah, which is the mitzvah of counting of the Omer. So now this period of time is a period of which we count the Omer, which is a 7-week count, which starts the second day of Passover, Pesach, which we counted every day. It's 1 day, 2 days since, and we count our way till the giving of the Torah, which is Shavuos. And so what does the counting of the Omer have to do with this? So again, what the Rebbe finds in this, everything he sees the absolute truth. So what is the essence of the counting of the Omer? The counting of the Omer is, let me explain what Omer is. Omer is a certain measure, a Hebrew word for a measure, like a pound. An Omer is a measure. And in the temple on the second day of Passover, there was a special offering that was brought in the temple. And it was consisted of barley. And the barley was brought, how much barley did they bring? An Omer of barley, a measure of barley. And they had to, cut the barley and roast it, turn it into, it was wet still, the barley, it was still fresh, because it happens in spring when it's just fresh. They would roast it, get it really, and then there was a whole process, and they would grind the barley, and then they would bring it to the holy temple, and they would lift it up. It says the Kohen has to lift the barley up in front of God. And then the Torah says that from the day you lifted up the barley, the measure of barley, you should count 7 weeks. From there comes the mitzvah that we still do today, is even though we don't have a temple and we didn't offer the barley offering, but we count from the day that would have been done. We count today's day number 1, today's day number 2, today's day number 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, what's the spiritual meaning of that? So in many Hasidic discourses, Kabbalistic explanations, it explains the concept as follows. Barley is not really a refined type of food. Barley is a food that is usually used for animals. Wheat is the grain preferable for human consumption. The reason the day after Passover, the day that we were liberated from Egypt, the mitzvah in the temple is to take a measure of barley and lift it up, is God is essentially saying to us, we just went out of Egypt. I know you're gung-ho excited about me. Your soul is fired up, flaming desire and passion to connect to me. But I don't want you to forget that you have barley. You have an animal side. You have a body. I don't want you to neglect your body and escape it and just, leave your body behind. I want you to bring your body with you. I want you to bring your animal, your ego with you. Now the ego consists, our animal soul consists of 7 emotions, 7 core emotions. Those 7 core emotions need to be polished and elevated. So in the temple, they lifted up the measure of barley. It was an enormous godly empowerment for every single person to begin doing the heavy lifting in our work to prepare ourselves for the giving of the Torah. We have a week time to work on the every day, or I'm sorry, every week is dedicated to the refinement of another one of our human character traits. For example, the first week we work on love and kindness. We all have in our animalistic self, we have the power to love. Now, that power of love on the animal level refers to lusts and cravings and desires and wants and the pleasure-seeking element of the person. So we got to refine that. You got to elevate. You got to work on that. How do you work on that? It takes meditation. You don't want to eradicate that. You want to direct that to a godly purpose. How to love. How to take your passions and elevate those passions to be where they belong. The second week, we work on our power of restraint, the power of discipline, the power of which can sometimes that restraining fire element in our soul, which can lead to anger and to other negative things. We have to direct it, fix it, and elevate it to its holiness and spirituality. Then comes the third one, which is the week of compassion. So we work 7 days, the 7 emotions, week by week by week. That's the meaning of counting in the bar. So really, that means it's the elevation of the world, because the world is made up of 7 days. The world was created through 7 emotions. 7 is the number of nature, lifting nature up. When the Jews went into the land of Israel was a land of 7 nations. We had to conquer the land of the 7 nations. They were perverted. The people who lived in the land of Israel were perverted people. And when the Jews conquered it and they turned it into a Jewish holy land, which means conquering spiritually, psychologically, it meant conquering the 7 core emotions and turning them into a godly force. In other words, what the same idea that we had spoken about before, the refinement of the world. That's what it is. It's via our 7 emotions, and it's not only a cleansing process that happens inside of us, because when we work on our animalistic self and we refine it and we turn it towards holiness and towards godliness, we have an impact on the entire world. And the Rebbe derives that from something interesting. In the prayer that we say right after we count the Omer, we speak about this rectification that happens through the counting of the Omer. Now, by the way, to be understood, the mitzvah is just counting. So we can do this mitzvah. It takes 2 minutes a day. You count, you make a special blessing, and you count. But if you want to really do the spirit of the mitzvah, is to really remember it all day long, to think about it. So after the conclusion of the reading of the Omer, we say as follows: Master of the world, I'm translating the prayer. You commanded us through Moses, your servant, to count the counting of the Omer in order to purify us from our shells and from our impurities. That means we have dark elements inside of us that need to be purified. In other words, part of us is exile. Part of our flawed nature, our flawed, impure part of us that is not clean. It's not our beautiful, godly soul, but the parts of us that are not so refined yet. And this counting of the Omer is meant to help us purify those elements of darkness inside of us. Like you stated in your Torah, you should count for yourselves from the morrow of the Shabbos, which means from the day after Pesach, the day after Passover, from the day that you bring the elevated Omer, measure of barley, 7 complete weeks you should count. Until the morrow of the Shabbos, you should count 50 days. What's the purpose of that? So that the souls of your people Israel will become purified from their defilement. And therefore, this is what you commanded us. And we say, and therefore, let it be the will from before you, Hashem, God, my God, and God of our fathers, that in the merit of the counting of the Omer that I counted today, let it be rectified, that which I have blemished in all the blemishes in this particular aspect of my own soul, which is what? And then we go on every single day, we speak about that particular emotion related to that day. We spoke before, there are 7 core emotions, but each one includes all the other emotions in them. So it's really a spectrum of 49 different nuances of the human condition And in our case, we're rectifying the base animalistic side of ourselves, which is also composed of these 49 elements, which every day we're saying that which I have misused and that which part of me that is not yet rectified, let that now be rectified now. And as a result of that, I will become purified and I will become sanctified with supernal holiness. So we're getting the idea that through our polishing the dark elements, we're actually gaining and reaching and becoming sanctified with supernal holiness, like we discussed earlier, that precisely through engaging the world and the dark side is we get a holier than we were before. But now we add something else, which we said earlier. Don't forget about the bigger world. It's not just about you. It's about the entire world. And through this is the prayer. And through this, let it open up a flow in all of the worlds. In other words, a cosmic flow should be illuminated with enormous spiritual illumination and godly light, in order that that illumination should now continue in the rectification of our souls and our spirits and our neshama from every type of small blemish. So it's interesting. The Rebbe points out, we begin with the rectification of our soul. Then we talk about a cosmic illumination in all of the cosmos and in all of the worlds. In other words, the world outside of us, including the physical, bigger world outside of us, including the 8 billion people on the planet, that they should be impacted by my purification of my animal soul. Because we're all intertwined and interwoven one with each other. And every time we refine ourselves, our ego, just a little bit, it has an effect on the entire world. So we're asking God that He should expedite that effect, in order that we should again be purified. So the Rebbe really asks, why don't you first pray for yourself and then you'll continue on with the worlds? Why is it that you mention the worlds and then you come back to the purification of self? And the Rebbe points out exactly the point that we were saying earlier, that it's only via the world and the purification of the outside reality, the dark stuff in the world, that we ultimately reach our highest potentials and our highest connections. Don't ignore the world. So the Rebbe says, take a look. We're engaged. This particular 7 weeks, we couldn't be more conscious of this concept that redemption comes to the world only through unlocking the godly potential that there is in the dark elements of the world. In the exile itself is the redemption. The Aleph, you need to find the Aleph in the exile, and then you get Geula. So he realized it and revealed it to us in the counting of the Omer. Now the Rebbe says, let's take another component of our experience now and discover it here as well, and that's the weekly parsha, the Torah portion. What is the Torah? We're going to do this very briefly. I want to learn, this is chapter 8, because I want to finish till 9 so that we can finish this tomorrow. So in chapter 8, the Rebbe adds now another point. Takes it and he says, let's take a look at the parsha. Now in the parsha, it speaks about the high priest going in on the holiest day of the year, Yom Kippur, into the Holy of Holies. So generally, for most people, this means, okay, we spoke about the material and the physical and the world and the sublimation of the world. It's all very nice. But now we take a break from it all. Because now it's Yom Kippur. What's Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur is called Shabbos. Just like Shabbos, we take a leave, we break away from the world, and we go into we disconnect, and we go into a zone of pure spirituality. Yom Kippur is called the Shabbos of all Shabboses. It's the peak Shabbos. We don't only take a rest from our business world, because just like on Shabbos, you stop working. We take a rest from all physicality, because we don't eat, we don't drink, we kind of disconnect from the body completely. We dress in white, and we're sublime angels. We're going into like a really, really spiritual state. It's like taking completely a break from the world and entering into the zone. Seemingly opposite of what we spoke about. If the purpose is to illuminate the darkness, here we're leaving the darkness behind and allowing our souls to soar beyond our body. So the Rebbe says, hey, as much as we can do that, imagine the high priest. What is he doing it? He's going into the temple, and he's going into the Holy of Holies, a place that you're never allowed to go in. The place where God is really revealed over there, in the Holy of Holies. The highest time. This moment, you would think that this is a moment where all physicality is suspended, and the high priest kind of experiences an outer body experience, leaves his soul behind, enters into the complete spiritual zone of complete oneness with God. There's no physicality, there's just pure spirit. Pure spirit. The Rebbe says, what is the first commandment? God tells Aaron, don't be like your sons. This week in the Torah, don't be like your sons. The two holy sons went into the holy on the day of the inauguration of the temple. His two sons went in and they passed out. They died. In other words, they allowed their souls get super hyper excited that the souls actually took flight from the body and became subsumed in the spiritual. And God warns the high priest, Aaron the high priest, you're the holiest person. You may never, ever, ever forget that you're a physical human being and you're meant to be physical and you're meant to be attached to a body. Even when you're in the holiest moment, bring that holiest moment into your body. And the proof to that is the holiest place in the world, as holy as it is, it's still a physical place on planet Earth. We would imagine that in the temple, there should be like a gateway. We will like walk through past the threshold of that door. You'll leave the physical world and you're floating in the clouds. You're floating above the material. You're in a metaphysical space. You're no more in this world. That's not what it was. The holiest temple, the Holy of Holies, was a physical place. It had physical measurements. It was very holy. It was the epitome of holiness. And space itself was actually spaceless over there, but it still was contained within the physical world. Because it has to be in the physical. And then the Rebbe says, to make that even stronger, take a look at all the priests. The priests are, from amongst the Jewish people, the most spiritual people. Yet when the priests went to officiate, one of the requirements is that they had special garments that they wore, clothing that they wore. One of the things about these garments is that the garments were made in a way that they were beautiful. They were physically, aesthetically beautiful. And so much so that if the Kohen fails to wear one of these garments, his service is invalid. He must serve God with these garments, and these garments must. All right. So generally, we would think that the garments their meaning, their significance are purely spiritual. See, the priest is still a physical human being. He can't run around naked over there in the temple. So he's got to wear something. He's wearing a garment. So God is telling him which garments are the appropriate garments conducive to the great spiritual life. But in the Chumash itself, in the Torah itself, that these garments should be for glory and for splendor. Looking by who? Who's the glory and the splendor? You know who? By a fashion expert who's coming to watch the temple, and he looks at these people and say, wow, you look really chic. You really are looking good. The garments were physically, aesthetically beautiful to the eyes. And why is that important? Why is the splendor, why is the physical beauty important? All the beauty of God, all the infinite beauty of God must express itself in something aesthetically beautiful down here. Geula world means, a Moshiach world means that your house needs to be beautiful. Your kitchen should be nice. Your bedroom linen should be nice and beautiful. Your bathroom should be beautiful. Your clothing should be well dressed. Everything in the physical should reflect perfection and godly perfection. Total opposite of what we would think. It's haughtiness. It's no. Once you achieve the recognition and understanding that the material physical world is one with God and God is perfect, then the physical world needs to reflect the perfection of God's perfection. It must be exquisitely beautiful. So we have this incredible lesson. We're at the peaks of spirituality, at the peaks of godliness, of transcendence, and yet we make sure to have an eye on the physical world. It should match. It should express itself. This is so wild. And that's Moshiach. That's Geula. The moment you run away and you take it away, you want to just, it's disconnecting. disconnecting from your purpose, it's disconnecting from truth, it's disconnecting from everything. The Aleph needs to be found in the Goyla, you have to find the Giyur. Okay, so we're going to leave it over here. This concludes the second part of this awesome talk. And the Rebbe just concludes, I just want to say, is that when Moshiach will come, the experience of going into the Holy of Holies is going to be not just on Yom Kippur, but it's going to be all the time. Which means that the real space of the high priest isn't the holy. Now he's only allowed to go in Yom Kippur because the world is not perfect yet. But when the world will be in its perfection, then the Kohen Gadol will live in the Holy of Holies, will be able to go into the Holy of Holies all the time. Soon he's going to connect it to every Jew going into the Holy of Holies. Meaning that a state where the physical is in perfect receptibility for the highest and deepest manifestation of God. And that's where it's at. Okay, we're going to leave it here. Bezrat Hashem, we will continue tomorrow. May Moshiach be here by then, revealed.